the Last Supper that was described in the Gospels as being maybe it wasn't a Passover Seder, it was like a fellowship meal or something like that, and rather than a traditional Passover. But I think 3 of the Gospels actually call it a Passover, and so 3 out of the 4 of them anyway call it a Passover. So I think that there's a danger in calling it a fellowship meal, because then if you only present it Passover as a memorial of the Exodus, and then disassociate the Passover with Yeshua and his sacrificial death and being the Passover lamb, then I think there's a danger there when you disassociate that Yeshua from the Passover, because he is the Passover. He's the Passover lamb. So and some of the people, they talk about in the gospel accounts that they said, well, it couldn't be a Passover because they didn't mention eating lamb or bitter herbs, nor is the unleavened bread clearly defined. So I think, and I had a couple of pictures. I pulled these out from last year that the Last Supper, everyone knows, the Last Supper, that's the famous one here. And then here's one that I like a little bit better. It's more of a modern version more of a modern artist's take on what the Passover might have looked like. And certainly it's a little bit more authentic because everybody is sitting down rather than they're in a kind of a low table and kind of reclining, as opposed to the other one where everyone was sitting up and they're all on one side of the table. Of course, that's for photographic purposes. They couldn't get everybody in if they had their backs to them. So anyway, that was the reasoning for it. All right. So anyway, this is just what I'd said, that some people look at the Last Supper as a traditional, just a meal. But Yeshua said himself, he says, I have looked forward to this Passover, having this Passover with you. And so I think you can't discount that. And just because you don't mention lamb and bitter herbs, to me, it's not a real good argument, because if I went into Houston and went to Pappasito's, and I said, okay, I went to Pappasito's and had Mexican food. If I didn't tell you that I ate chips and salsa, would you believe that I went to Pappasito's? Of course you would, because I said I went there. Just because I didn't mention that just because I didn't mention that I ate chips and salsa doesn't make it the fact that I did go ahead and eat at a Mexican restaurant. And same with the Passover, is that they just didn't mention it, that they ate roast lamb and said anything about the bitter herbs. So bitter herbs. Yeah, that's something that you really want to talk about. And then all about that. How'd you like the parsley? What about the lettuce? Okay, and wasn't that great horseradish? That's you're just not going to talk about that stuff. So anyway, and then they also talk about the bread that was used is also there's a couple of different words that are used in the Septuagint. They use azumos for unleavened bread that you see in Exodus 12 and 8, and then the Gospel used a more common word, which was the for just a generic bread. But both or all three of the Septuagint, the Mishnah, and the Targums, they also use artos to describe the showbread in the tabernacle. And of course, the showbread, as described in Exodus 25 and 30, was unleavened. So there again, I'm not sure that we could go along with that either. As far as the arguments for the Passover meal and the Last Supper being one and the same, here's some elements that I think Margaret Huey in her spring festival. It's in my notes. It'll be in my notes what the reference is. But she wrote a little book on the spring festival helper. I think is what the Messianic Spring Holiday Helper, and Margaret had these a few things that talk about that the meal was held inside the city of Jerusalem. Those that were present were reclining. That's like a Passover. That's what they would have had. The meal was held in the evening, and that they had blessings over the bread and wine, and they were dipping into a bowl of salt water with the bitter herbs. Because remember when Yeshua said, "Those who I give the sop to," so that's a reference there. And then they also did the Hallel at the conclusion of the meal, singing in those. So anyway, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all call it a Passover meal. If you here's some of their in Matthew. It says, "Where do you want us to eat the Passover?" There there are some of you that are not on the online. You're calling in, so let me read this. Matthew 26:17 through 19. Now on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And he said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is near. I am to keep the Passover at your house with my disciples." The disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. That's in Matthew. And then Mark said on the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb was being sacrificed, his disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go and prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And he sent two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the city, and a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him, and wherever he enters, say to the owner of the house, the teacher says, 'Where's my guest room, which I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' And he himself will show you a large upper room furnished and ready for us, prepare it for us there." The disciples went out and came to the city and found it just as he had told them, and they prepared for the Passover. And then finally, similarly in Luke 22:7 to 15, it says, "Then came the first day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. And Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, 'Go and prepare the Passover for us that we may eat it.' They said to him, 'Where do you want us to prepare it?' And he says, 'When you have entered the city, a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house that he enters. And you shall say to the owner of the house, the teacher says to you, where's the guest room in which I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large furnished upper room. Prepare it there.' And they left and found everything just as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover. When the hour had come, he reclined at the table, and the apostles with him, and he said to them, 'I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer.'" Now that was all from the King James version, and I can actually No, that's the wrong button. Hang on. I can pull it up from what we have, the um, Tree of Life version, and see what they said on this last one here. It's kind of interesting when you get the different different versions, especially with the Tree of Life version here. Let's see. Let me pull this up real quickly. Okay. Hang on. Yeah. Okay, Luke, and it's 27, 22, 7. All right, yeah. When you have all these translations, man, it just gets because here they say, then when the day of matzah, then came the day of matzah when the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed, and then he said that last verse 15. He says, and I said to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. And he said, I tell you, I will never eat it again until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. So that kind of talks about what the three of the four Gospels had spoken of, and then it goes on and even talks about what he had, how he did it, and it's not exactly like what we do today. It's a little different. I think the Passover back then had evolved. The very first Passover, they said you eat the lamb with the bitter herbs and eat it in haste with unleavened bread, and then they had some instructions on the lamb. But today we've added, we've got the bitter herbs, the parsley dipped in the salt, and then you've got the horseradish and maybe a piece of lettuce, the carpus, and then you've got the lamb shank bone on there. Of course, in the Ashkenazic tradition, you don't eat lamb anymore because the temple is gone, but in the Sephardic tradition, you do eat lamb. And so there's differences today, and there is some speculation that we won't get into tonight, but that the 4 cups of wine that are consumed in the Passover may be reflective of influences of the early believers in Yeshua, that based on his custom and what he had talked about, that there may be so the four glasses of wine may very well have come from the early believers that it got into there. So I think I had a quote. Let's get back to let's see where we're going here. All right. I don't even know what to get back to my quote here, the stuff here. Here it is. All right. A quote from this one author said the Last Supper was a symbolic act, a foretaste of the fellowship meal that awaits the faithful remnant in the kingdom of God. The forgiveness of sin, the end of exile, the restoration of Zion, the conversion of the Gentiles, and the consummation of God's kingdom are all themes that are bound up in this one event. In a word, the Last Supper anticipated the cosmic transformation of the entire world. That's pretty fancy wording there. I wish I'd thought of that. But it sounded good. But it definitely was a momentous meal that occurred during that time. It's kind of comical. I see Passover Haggadahs. They continue to evolve and they have been evolving for the last 2,000 years, 2,500 years. However, that many times when we've actually had Haggadahs, there is even nowadays there is a cartoonist that and I can't think of his name right now, but his cartoon is called Dry Bones, and if you want some, he's a political cartoonist in a way, but he has published a Haggadah that is it's all in cartoons, and it's kind of comical. And I wanted to do a Passover Seder with the cartoons and so forth, but cooler heads prevailed, and so we're doing a more a regular Messianic Haggadah this year. But one of these days, I'm going to pull out a cartoon Haggadah that this guy wrote, and at least have a few laughs out of it. But things are still evolving, especially in the Messianic community. I see just this last week there's been quite a lot of discussion within the Rabbis Forum about, well, how do you do your Seder? When do you do your Seder? And it was all over the board as to when they actually did Seders. That this year at Tree of Life, we're doing it on the actual first night as a community Seder. But I think next year, as we have a few more folks, and I'm sure that we're going to have people that maybe are not as familiar with Seders and so forth, that I will have some training involved. And what we will do is train people how to do a Passover Seder in their home, because I feel that it's very, very important that the actual Passover Seder be done at home as a family thing rather than corporate, large, in the home with family and close friends or something like that. That's one reason that we try, if we can, get with our children and do one at home that way too. So as well as the corporate. But anyway, let's talk about the dates of the Passover meal and the subsequent crucifixion. The traditional dates, the Christian as well as the Protestant and the Catholic view is that the crucifixion was on Good Friday. I mean, this is what everyone has been taught. If you grew up in the Christian community, this is what you were taught. And we have Good Friday. In the business world, you have Good Friday off as a nod toward the Christian background of the United States. Excuse me, I had a Marco Rubio moment there. But there was a problem when counting the days. For me, there's a problem in that Yeshua himself in Matthew 12 and 40 said, just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, the whale, the fish, whatever you want to call him, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Now, we know that in Jewish literature, a lot of times they would say something like, it was 3 days. Well, 3 days was kind of an approximation, and it could have been a part of 3 days. Or if they said it was 40 days. Well, was it 40 24-hour days, or was it a little bit over 40 or a little bit less than 40? It was kind of an approximation. However, by Yeshua saying 3 days and 3 nights, that pretty well nails it down. For me, anyway, it nails it down to a 72-hour period of him being, it says, in the heart of the earth. So Now, there's I've got a couple of these chronologies here that I've written down, and remember now that sometimes the Christian view is tied to the Gregorian calendar rather than the Jewish calendar, and as I mentioned last week, that is one of the problems that we have with we're trying to figure out when Passover is going to be and when Easter is going to be, because back in 325 CE, Constantine, the emperor, he divorced those two dates rather than going by the Jewish calendar, the lunar solar calendar that the Jews had used. He split it off and made the celebration of what the Christian church calls Easter, the crucifixion and the resurrection. He made that for the first full moon following the spring equinox, and so that separates it from and normally it is about the same as the Jewish calendar, because the Passover is on a full moon. However, this year, because we had a leap year in the Jewish calendar, we're celebrating Passover a month later. So now Wayne Carver, he's the Christian and Jew Foundation. He writes that when Israel was finally settled in Palestine, so there was a modification in the manner that the Passover feast was observed. For instance, in Yeshua's day, the Passover was no longer eaten in a standing position. Instead, it was eaten in a reclining position, just as the regular meals. And it's also symbolic, they tell me, of the people they could recline, because free men recline, slaves had to stand. And so, you remember the very first Passover in Egypt, when they were preparing to leave Egypt, they stood and actually had their clothes already, said their loins girded, which means that they had pulled up the robes and pulled a belt around them or a sash around it, so that they could walk out of Egypt quickly and not trip up over their long robes that they had. That was the time in the very first one they did it standing. Nowadays then at Yeshua's time they did it reclining, like a normal meal would have been back in those days. We don't eat like that, where you sit cross-legged or reclining at a table, a low table. We ate in a Bedouin village one time, and they had the low, the little tables that were only about a foot off the ground, and you sat around on pillows, cushions, and stuff like that. And it definitely takes a little bit of getting used to, because if you're not used to that, and you're sitting that way for any length of time, sometimes it takes a little bit for old bones to kind of uncreak and get back stretched out to where you can stand up a little bit. But that was their custom then. They would be reclining. In Yeshua's day, they tell us that it had become customary to kill the Passover lamb on the afternoon of the 13th of Nisan rather than on the evening of the 14th. Now, this is recorded by Josephus, the Jewish historian, and I believe I've read it from Edersheim also, Alfred Edersheim, that tells that there were sometimes as many as 250,000 lambs that would be slaughtered at Passover. Because remember, that was one of the feasts that every male had to come back to Jerusalem with. And so a lot of times they would bring their families with them. And so they would have like 250,000 lambs slain in one day. So they would start the day before, and then they would slaughter lambs for 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon, a day early, and that had become. It would begin around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 13th. Then by 5:30 in the afternoon, all the lambs were slain. And Josephus confirms that in the years just before the time of the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., it was customary to slay the lambs between the 9th and the 11th hour, meaning between 3 and 5 p.m. Now, these are from, obviously extra biblical records, but historical records that kind of help us to understand some of this. So, at sundown on the 13th of Nisan, the 14th of Nisan began. The lamb had been prepared, and the roasting was complete, and the participants gathered around the table and ate the Passover supper. Now, God's law of the Passover and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread calls the 14th of the month of Nisan the Passover, or Pesach. However, by the time of Yeshua, the Jews had come to call this the preparation day. And to them, the major feast day, or the high Sabbath, the high holy day, was on the 15th of Nisan. And so the days that the scriptures designated as the first day of unleavened bread. So this is part of what the confusion of what we have today in trying to figure out what this day is. And so this modification that we have here is confirmed by Matthew 26, 17 through 19. And let's see, verse 17 says, "Now the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, 'Where will you have us prepare for thee to eat the Passover?'" So they're using that day, first day of unleavened bread, which would have been, if this passage were to be interpreted in strict accordance with the law of Moses, it would not make any sense. The Passover was the 14th of Nisan, and the Passover lamb was to be eaten on that day. The first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread was Nisan the 15th. So now we can conclude that the terms associated with the observance of the Passover feast, which they appear in the New Testament, are used in accordance with the popular usage of the day, and maybe not so strictly according to the definition in the law of Moses. Again, I think that's kind of why we have the confusion today. And also, when you look at these time frames and you back it up, that the idea of Palm Sunday. If you look at the biblical record, Yeshua was coming from Jericho. I think it's an 8-mile hike from Jericho into Jerusalem, and the last couple of miles are they're the steepest. They're really going uphill then into Jerusalem, and so when it says that he was coming in, and then he went on to Bethany to stay with Mary and Martha and Lazarus, who were his good friends. And it said then the next day he went into Jerusalem, and the people laid down their robes in the palms, and that's where we get the Palm Sunday thing. But think of it this way: if he had been coming from Jericho into Jerusalem, and then the next day being the first day of the week, or the Sunday, then that would have meant that he would be traveling all day on Shabbat, and that Mary and Martha would be preparing this meal all day on Shabbat in preparation for him coming in. So we know that Yeshua kept the Sabbath in that regard, and he would not. I don't think he would have traveled all that distance because a Shabbat travel was like 2,240 feet, and it was expanded just a little bit to include Bethany, because during Passover, so many people were there, and they would stay in these outlying little towns like Bethany. So they did allow people to travel from Bethany back and forth into Jerusalem and call that a Sabbath day's journey. But so anyway, that would put Yeshua coming into Jerusalem then, not on a Sunday but on a Saturday, and then and there again, that would put him in on the 10th of Nisan. Well, the 10th day was when the Jews were supposed to select a lamb and bring it into their home and examine it and keep it there in the home for the 4 days before they slaughtered it. And here Yeshua is being brought into Jerusalem on the 10th day. It just makes makes more sense, and it's more symbolic of that. So anyway, that is kind of where the let's go on and look at some of these things that they would start out, like I said, on the 13th, and I think I've got here's a better one. I like this one better. I found this one just last night, and I like it better. It's kind of busy, and you can kind of see it does show a little bit more about between the night when the evening and then the day. So on this Wednesday, the 14th of Nisan, that's the day of preparation, and this was before the annual or the Pesach Shabbat, not the weekly Shabbat, which would have been over here on Saturday. And I'm going to see if I can find one of these tools here that I can draw or a spotlight or something. Let's see, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work either. All right, look at this. Okay, there's a spotter there. So if we look over here, it says Yeshua ate the Passover meal with his disciples and instituted the new covenant, and that would have been the evening of the now they're calling that the evening of the 14th. Now here again we're looking at these different ideas that people have, but it's to me it was the Wednesday. He had his meal on a Wednesday, and that evening, and then throughout the night, then the next day that would have been the Tuesday evening, what we would call Tuesday evening, because Wednesday is the day here. This is the day, and Tuesday is from our day here and into the evening. So that's when he would have had his meal, and so this day here, Wednesday, which is the 14th, and it begins on the evening of what we would call, if we were doing this the days of the week, it would be Tuesday evening going into Wednesday. So if you get that, can you get that straight there?
If you're not following, it's because the Jewish day starts at sundown in the evening till the next day. Okay, we always, the Gregorian calendar, a day starts, daybreak.
Well, it starts at midnight.
Or midnight. But in the Jewish calendar, it starts at sundown.
So that, and even today, like when we're doing our feasts and so forth, we will begin those at sundown, basically the day before. Like this year, we're going to have our Passover Seder beginning after sundown on Friday, and then the actual day then is Saturday. But anyway, we would start here. This would be Tuesday evening, and he's betrayed, and then they brought him before Pilate and the Caiaphas. And so for all of those trials and everything, which were actually illegal, for them to hold those kind of trials in the dead of night, but they did it anyway. And so then he was brought before Pilate early in the morning on Wednesday, and he was condemned, and he was taken out. He was beaten and taken out and put on the cross at about 9 o'clock on this day, on Wednesday. And then it said that around 3 o'clock he died. Now, traditionally, according to the Bible then, that would have been about the time that they would start slaughtering the Passover lambs. But because of the traditions that had evolved in Jerusalem by that time, they did it a day early, and that's a part of the confusion. So then anyway, we see that he was placed in the tomb because they wanted to get him off the cross and into the tomb because at sundown on Wednesday evening, at sundown, that began the high Sabbath of the 15th of Nisan, which was actual Passover. And so that's why they wanted to get him into the tomb. And so there begins the first night in the tomb. And then you count over to Thursday, and into Thursday night, that's one full day. That's 24-hour period. And then from Thursday evening and through the night, and then into Friday evening, that constitutes the second day of 48 hours. Now, it's significant here, I think, to see that the women, the Bible talks about the women bought and prepared spices for anointing his body after the Sabbath and before the weekly Sabbath. So what they did was they did it here on Friday after the high holy day of the Pesach Sabbath, and that was the only day that they could have done that. So they could have bought and prepared the spices, because the next day then was the weekly Shabbat, and they could not have done it they could not have done it during that day. So anyway, that if we keep on counting then from Friday evening, then all the way through Saturday, which was the Shabbat, and these women, they would have been resting on Shabbat. Well, then somewhere at sundown, right around sundown on Saturday, the weekly Shabbat, Yeshua rose from the grave exactly 3 days after he had been put in there, just like the prophecy was with Jonah and the Jonah and the whale. He was in the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. And so the Bible says that at that time Matthew records that there was an earthquake that right about the time of sunset on Shabbat, that Shabbat, and it rolled the stone away. And so at that point, Yeshua came out of the grave, and there's no eyewitnesses to the fact that he came out of the grave, but we know that the women came the next day. They said while it was still dark, so the sun hadn't even come up yet, and the women came to anoint his body, and he was already gone. He was resurrected. So that's the scenario then. That shows that. And Carlos has asked if I'd include this. Yes, I will include this. You wouldn't believe how I had to extract this from something else that I had. I didn't know how to do it, and I finally figured out how to do that. Now, all right. So that is pretty much the scenario that I had for this. And I'm going to. I got to go back here and have. There's a couple things. Chuck had a comment. Chuck had a comment that. Okay, I don't think the time from betrayal to crucifixion is okay. Something I don't think.
No, what I said, I said it should repeat, but I don't feel that this is too realistic. The time frame from the time of betrayal to crucifixion seemed a little quick. I know they had the kangaroo courts, if you will, but the time, you figure the time walking, because they didn't have vehicles, the beating, the scourging, the having to range everyone for the trials, getting all the legislators in one room to the other, then the deal with Barabbas, and then walking down the Via Dolorosa to Golgotha. I just don't know. That's awful quick. And everybody's on foot.
But at the same time, though, it is from what the records and what I understand is that all these trials, they did go in through the night, and we know that that in the house of Caiaphas, which you can walk from Caiaphas's house to what's the court up there where Pilate would have been, and the name escapes me right now. What the fort there, Apollonia or something like that was. It doesn't take that long to walk there, and they got Pilate up at early in the morning, and then the Via Dolorosa. I don't know if you again, that is not a very long route from there. If he in fact went that way. If he went the other way to what we call Golgotha today, there again, it's not a very long way. And in terms of dragging a cross, typically he would not have drug a cross. All he would have had was a board, maybe the cross piece, and it would have been. Maybe like a 2x6 or something like that, about 3 or 4 feet long, is what they would have saddled him with as far as what he would have to carry. However, even that would have been a Herculean.
Someone had to help him. But the whole deal was they went through the night and had him out there early morning. They were trying to make this a done deal before the people realized what was going on, because they knew the people would rebel.
Yeah, it was he was pretty popular, and so what are you saying, Chuck? Then that you think that it would have see, the betrayal actually took place. The betrayal took place the day before, because the Bible says that Judas did all of this, and he was just waiting for a time to actually make the handoff and make the betrayal. And so, if Yeshua ate the dinner, say at sunset on Tuesday night, then they would have had from 8, 9 o'clock at night to go in Gethsemane. Again, Gethsemane is not that far back, down the little valley, Kidron Valley, and then back up to Caiaphas' house. You can see it. I mean, you can stand at Caiaphas' house and look right over at Gethsemane. It's just right across the little valley there. And it was a kangaroo court, and from there, then they took him on to Pilate. It's fast. It was definitely a fast-paced deal, but a lot of times lynchings are like that. And so I think that's what you could actually call this. This would have been in modern day terminology, I think we could call it a lynching. Ray had said that he could have gone the ladies could have gone to the tomb after dark on the Shabbat. They could have, but then there's a little question about that. They said that, it's a question of what did it say, that it was the beginning of light or something like that.
No, in one of the Gospels, I forget which one, it says early on the first day of the week.
Yeah.
Now, from a Jewish perspective, from a Hebraic biblical perspective, the day begins in the evening. Evening and morning, first day. Evening and morning with the second day.
Yeah, and regardless,
we just know it was dark.
It was dark, and the Bible says that at the beginning of light, the word.
No, it doesn't say that. It says when the first day of the week dawned.
Well, yeah, but the dawning is a translation that the first day of the week when at the beginning of light, and that also could have meant when the moon came up, it was still a full moon. And when the moon came up and began to shed light that way too, it's possible. I mean, I had not thought of that.
But the English rendering, when something dawns, it begins. Doesn't necessarily mean light. Like when something dawns, it begins. It starts.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is that the Greek was translated as dawn, but was actually what could also have been saying that the beginning of light. So I mean, it's one of those kind of a distinction without a difference. I think they went there and they were already too late. He had already risen somewhere around sunset on Saturday, what we would call Saturday night, just at the end of Shabbat, and that's the point that I was trying to.
So you're saying he rose on the Sabbath?
No, I'm saying that he rose immediately after sunset, after the Sabbath, after the Havdalah.
He was buried, but he was in the ground before sunset.
Yeah, it's a question of of timing. Was he when did they put him in? Did they put him in just as the sun was setting, and did he come out just as the sun was setting again? It's basically 3 days, give or take a few minutes, I would imagine.
Well, he died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, approximately.
Right.
Pretty close to that. And then they took him down from the execution stake and immediately took him to the tomb. So let's say somewhere between, I would say, even if it was 6 o'clock, it's still light out at 6 o'clock, during Pesach.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm of the opinion he rose on the Sabbath, before the Sabbath ended.
It could have been. I don't know. I think that he rose somewhere right there at the very end of Shabbat. But the idea being that he was in the grave for 3 full days and 3 full nights, and not
Right.
a partial deal like the traditional Christian
Right.
view is, that he was there for part of Friday, Saturday, for maybe 40 hours, maybe, instead of the full 72. So anyway, that's kind of what I was trying to get at tonight. That in terms of a chronology, and it's kind of interesting. It's kind of confusing, and it takes a while to go through it and get your hands around it, because we don't think in terms of the day beginning at sunset. We think of the day beginning at midnight, and so that kind of puts us in a little bit different view. So anyway, that is the recorded part of our lesson tonight. I did want to thank everybody that showed up. We had a real good crowd. Some new folks showed up with us tonight. And next week we will continue with go back into Galatians. We've got 2 more lessons to go in Galatians, and we will finish that off. And I think after Galatians, we're going to start looking at the tabernacle, the symbolism and the makeup of the tabernacle. I think that would be a real good study to do for a while, kind of go back in history instead of going into things with Paul, because Paul, trying to understand Paul will give you a headache. So we're going to go back to the tabernacle for a while. So I want to wish everyone a Shavua Tov, and we'll see you next week.